She said it didn't mean anything, but lies only hide what the heart refuses to admit. And the moment I saw the truth in her eyes, I stopped believing her words. I met her on an ordinary Tuesday, the kind that usually drifts by without meaning. But she wasn't ordinary. The first time she walked into the room, it felt like someone had turned down all the noise and left only calm. She wasn't loud or demanding attention. She had that quiet presence, the kind that doesn't need to ask for space because it naturally creates it. She was older than me, not by a little, but in a way that showed. Not just in the soft lines around her eyes or the faint silver in her hair, but in how she carried herself. There was grace in her restraint, every gesture thought out, every word considered. You could tell she'd seen things, lived through them, and learned to speak only when it mattered. I noticed her before I meant to. Maybe it was the way her eyes softened when she smiled, or the way she listened when others talked, not pretending to care, but actually caring. In a world full of noise, she paid attention. We worked in the same building, not directly together, but close enough to cross paths, the kind of proximity that makes coincidence feel suspicious after a while. She'd pass by my desk in the mornings, coffee in hand, always with that faint scent of vanilla and something warm I could never name. She never rushed. She'd glance at me sometimes, not a stare, not even a full look, just a flicker that said she'd noticed me too. At first, I told myself it was nothing. She was just kind, just professional. But kindness can be dangerous when it comes from the right person. It lingers. It builds meaning where there shouldn't be any. Over time, we started to talk. About small things, music, the weather, how the coffee here was terrible, but we kept drinking it anyway. She had this soft laugh that came with a slight tilt of her head, like she was surprised by her own amusement. Sometimes I'd make a joke just to hear it again. I didn't flirt. Not because I didn't want to, but because it didn't feel right to. She wasn't someone you tried to charm. She was someone you tried to understand. There was something about the way she carried her past, visible but never spoken of. A wedding ring she no longer wore. Photos on her desk that disappeared one day without explanation. I didn't ask. I just noticed. And maybe that's where it began, in the noticing. The quiet kind of connection that doesn't need words. The way our eyes would meet when everyone else was talking. The shared silences that somehow felt like conversations. Some people enter your life loudly, like a storm. She arrived like a change in weather, gradual, gentle, and impossible not to feel. I remember one evening, the office nearly empty, the sky outside dimming into that soft blue before nightfall. She stood by the window, arms crossed, staring out like she was waiting for something that never came. I didn't say a word. I just watched her reflection in the glass, and for a second, I wondered if she could feel me watching. That was the night I realized it. Whatever this was between us, it wasn't just friendly. It was quiet, but it was real. And it was growing. It started small, like most things that matter. A longer pause at the end of a conversation. A look that lingered just a heartbeat too long. A silence that didn't feel awkward anymore, just heavy with something unnamed. We'd gotten used to staying late. She'd be at her desk, sleeves rolled up, hair pulled back, focus written all over her face. I'd make up excuses to stay too, finishing reports that could have waited, checking emails I didn't care about. But truthfully, I just liked being around her when everyone else had gone home. The world outside those office walls faded. There was only the soft hum of the printer, the tapping of her pen, the low rhythm of our breathing filling the space between us. Sometimes, she'd sigh quietly, stretch, and glance my way. "You're still here?" she'd ask with a faint smile, one that told me she already knew the answer. "Guess I'm just bad at leaving," I'd say. She'd chuckle, a sound that felt warm enough to chase away the fatigue of the whole day. And then she'd go back to her work, her face lit by the faint blue of her computer screen, her features soft and thoughtful. There were moments when our hands brushed, reaching for the same file, the same pen. Just a second of skin against skin, but enough to make the air shift between us. She'd pull her hand back, not abruptly, just gently, like she didn't want to, but knew she should. She had this way of pretending nothing happened, eyes steady, voice calm, but the faint color in her cheeks always gave her away. One night, the rain started out of nowhere. The kind of downpour that makes the city sound alive again. The office windows fogged up, the lights inside reflecting faint halos against the glass. She stood near the window, arms folded, watching the rain like it was saying something only she could hear. I found myself beside her without really deciding to move. We didn't speak at first. The silence between us wasn't empty, it was full of questions, of restraint, of something neither of us wanted to name. "Strange how peaceful it sounds," she said quietly. "Rain, I mean. Like it makes everything feel softer." "Maybe because it hides the noise," I said. She turned her head slightly, eyes meeting mine. "You think we need to hide the noise too?" I didn't answer, not because I didn't know what to say, but because every word felt too heavy for that moment. So I just looked at her, and she looked back, and something in that silence told us both we were crossing into dangerous ground. The next day, she was distant again, polite, composed, professional. But something had changed. There was a carefulness in how she moved around me now, a tension in her smile that hadn't been there before. It wasn't avoidance, it was awareness. The kind that comes when two people know something unspoken has begun, something fragile, something neither of them meant to happen but both quietly wanted. And from then on, every touch, every glance, every accidental brush of her hand felt charged. The space between us wasn't just space anymore. It was a secret. It was late again, the kind of night when the air feels heavier, when everyone else has gone home, and the building hums with quiet loneliness. She'd left her jacket on the back of her chair, saying she'd be right back. I stayed, pretending to be busy, but really, I just didn't want the evening to end yet. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. The rain had started again outside, a slow, steady drizzle tapping against the window. That's when I saw her. She was standing in the parking lot, under one of the dim streetlights, her phone pressed tight to her ear. The rain had already dampened her hair, strands sticking to her face. I couldn't hear her words, just her tone, soft, trembling. There was something in it I hadn't heard before, guilt. Or maybe fear. She turned away from the building as if trying to hide her face. Her free hand moved through her hair, not casually, but restlessly, like she didn't know what to do with it. I don't know how long I stood there, just watching her from behind the glass. I told myself it wasn't my business. But it didn't feel that way. When she finally came back inside, she startled slightly when she saw me. Her smile came too quickly. "Still here?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Just finishing up." She nodded, brushing rain from her coat. "You should go home. It's getting late." Her voice was steady, but her eyes weren't. There was something flickering behind them, like a secret trying to stay buried. For the rest of the night, she didn't look at me once. She packed her things quietly, the faint sound of her bracelets clinking as she moved. And I knew, without any proof, without a word spoken, that something had changed. The next morning, she came in early. Too early. Her hair was neatly tied, her smile practiced. She was polite, careful, the way people get when they're building walls. I wanted to ask, but how do you ask someone if they're lying when you don't even know what about? Days passed like that, her laughter thinner, her eyes guarded. And the silence between us, once peaceful, now felt sharp. I started noticing small things, the way she kept her phone turned over on the desk, the messages she deleted before reading them completely, the moments she'd step outside to take a call she didn't explain. One evening, I caught her reflection in the glass door, her face lit by her phone screen, her expression soft, almost tender. But not for me. She quickly put the phone away when she noticed me watching. Our eyes met for just a second, and in that second I felt it, that crack in trust. Small, invisible, but deep enough to change everything. That night, I went home and lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The image of her, standing in the rain, voice trembling into the phone, wouldn't leave me. I didn't know who she was talking to, or what she was hiding. But I knew this. When someone tells you nothing's wrong, and you can feel that something is, that's when everything starts to break. It had been building for days. The tension, the half-truths, the quiet that didn't feel peaceful anymore. We still talked, but our words skimmed the surface, circling everything except what mattered. Every time she smiled, it looked like she was trying to convince herself that she still could. I told myself to let it go, to stop caring. But you can't unsee what someone's eyes have already confessed. That evening, the office was empty again. She was gathering her things, neat and methodical, the way she always did when she wanted control. I watched her from my desk, my hands clenched too tight around a pen that had stopped writing long ago. Finally, I said it, not loudly, not angrily, but with the kind of exhaustion that only truth carries. Who was it on the phone? Her body froze for a second before she looked up. Her expression didn't change, not really, but something behind it did. What do you mean? She asked too casually. You know what I mean. She exhaled, setting down her bag. It didn't mean anything, she said softly. And just like that, every hope I had of being wrong disappeared. I stood, trying to meet her calm with my own, but I couldn't. My voice cracked despite me. Then why did you hide it? Her eyes darted away, to the window, to the floor, anywhere but me. Because it was easier, she whispered. Easier than what? Easier than explaining something I wasn't supposed to feel. Her words landed heavy. The honesty in them was worse than any lie. I wanted to be angry. I tried to be, but all I felt was the ache of something beautiful breaking under its own weight. She moved closer, hesitant but deliberate. You have to understand, she said quietly. I didn't plan any of this. I didn't mean to let it happen. I shook my head. You don't accidentally hide things, not from someone who cares. Her eyes glistened in the low office light, and for the first time, she looked her age, tired, human, fragile. I didn't want to hurt you, she said. Or make you think there was more than there should have been. There was more, I said. There still is. You just don't want to call it what it is. The air between us was thick, not with anger, but with everything we'd left unsaid. The hum of the ceiling lights filled the silence, steady and unkind. She looked at me, her lips parting like she wanted to say something, then stopped. And in that pause, I realized she wasn't the only one hiding. I'd been hiding too, behind patience, behind silence, behind hope. Finally, she whispered, I'm sorry. It was the kind of sorry that doesn't ask for forgiveness. The kind that only admits to loss. She turned away before I could answer, her reflection fading in the darkened window. I stood there, staring after her, knowing that some truths don't end with closure. They just leave you standing in the quiet, holding the pieces of what could have been. The days after that night felt different, not in the way storms feel after they've passed, but in the way they feel right before they begin again. The air between us was still, but heavy. We still saw each other every day. The same building. The same routines. But we'd stopped meeting eyes. Our voices, once soft and familiar, now sounded like strangers rehearsing lines either of us believed. She went back to her old ways, always composed, always polite. If anyone looked at her, they'd never guess that anything had changed. But I saw it. I saw it in the way she avoided my side of the room, and how her laughter came shorter, quieter, less real. Sometimes, I'd catch her looking at me when she thought I wasn't watching, a glance that lasted barely a second before she turned away. It was enough to keep me holding on, and just long enough to remind me I shouldn't. I tried to move on, or at least, pretend to. I buried myself in work, spent longer hours at my desk, ignored the urge to check if she was still there after everyone else left. But pretending not to care is still caring. It just hurts differently. There were moments when the silence between us spoke louder than anything we'd ever said. When she'd walk past me, the faint scent of her perfume would hit, familiar and unwanted all at once. It was cruel, how something so small could bring everything back in an instant. One evening, I stayed late again. The office was empty, lights dimmed. I found her coffee mug still on her desk, lipstick on the rim, a quiet trace of her day. I stood there longer than I should have, just looking at it. It wasn't the object itself, it was what it represented. The ordinary things we shared before everything became complicated. I didn't realize she'd come back until I heard her voice behind me. "You shouldn't still be here," she said softly. I turned. She looked tired, not just physically, but in the way people look when they've been holding too much inside for too long. "I could say the same to you," I said. She smiled faintly, a smile that never reached her eyes. "I forgot something," she murmured, brushing past me. Her shoulder grazed mine as she reached for her bag. That single touch, unintentional, fleeting, felt like a memory reminding me it still existed. Neither of us spoke again. The elevator doors closed between us, her reflection fading as she left. That night, I walked home through the quiet streets, rain beginning to fall again. I didn't use my umbrella. I let it soak in, the chill, the loneliness, the silence. Because sometimes pain feels like the only thing keeping you connected to what's slipping away. And as I watched the streetlights blur through the rain, I realized something cruel but true: you don't miss the person most in their absence. You miss them in the moments they're near, pretending nothing ever happened. It happened on a Friday night. The kind of evening that hums with the weight of unfinished things. The office was nearly dark, the rain whispering against the windows again, steady and familiar. I was packing up to leave when I heard her footsteps behind me. Slow. Uncertain. I turned, half expecting another polite exchange, the kind that barely meant anything anymore. But when I saw her, I knew this wasn't that. Her eyes were tired, swollen slightly, like she hadn't slept. Her hair wasn't as neatly done as usual, a few strands loose around her face. For once, she didn't look composed, she looked real. Human. And scared. "Can we talk?" she asked. I wanted to say no, not out of spite, but because I wasn't sure I could handle hearing whatever she had to say. But I nodded anyway. She stood by the window, arms folded, her reflection trembling faintly in the glass from the city lights outside. "You've been avoiding me," she said quietly. I let out a breath. "So have you?" She gave a small, humorless smile. "Maybe we're both bad at goodbyes." I didn't respond. The silence pressed in, not empty, but loaded with everything we'd been refusing to face. Then she spoke again, voice softer. "That night, when you saw me outside. The call. It wasn't what you think." I stayed still. "Then tell me what it was." She hesitated. Her hand went to her throat, fingers trembling slightly. "It was someone from my past," she said finally. "Someone I thought I'd stopped caring about. I guess I wanted closure. But when I heard his voice, I realized I didn't want it at all. I just panicked. I didn't want you to see that side of me." Her voice cracked near the end, just a little, enough to sound honest. "I thought hiding it would make it easier," she continued. "I didn't want to explain feelings I didn't even understand. I didn't want you to think I was still tied to something that was long over. But the truth is—" She stopped, swallowed hard, and looked right at me. "The truth is, it didn't mean anything because I didn't want it to. You were the one who did." The words hit like a quiet collision, not loud, but impossible to ignore. For a long moment, neither of us moved. I could hear the rain, the low hum of the air vent, even the faint sound of her breathing. She looked at me like she'd been holding that sentence in for months, maybe years. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to stay cold, guarded. But her voice, the way it cracked when she said you were the one who did, undid everything. I took a step closer, just one. "Then why didn't you say it before?" "Because I wasn't supposed to feel this way," she whispered. "Not about you." And for the first time, the distance between us didn't feel impossible. It felt earned. Every inch of hesitation, every silence, every unspoken word had led us here. Two people standing in the half-light, finally out of places to hide. We didn't speak right away after that night. Words felt too fragile, too easily broken. But something in the air had changed, not like a door closing, but like one quietly opening. The following week was slow. Awkward. Yet somehow lighter. She still kept her distance, but not the same way. Her eyes found mine again in brief moments, across the hallway, over a shared document, in the quiet elevator rides where either of us pretended we didn't feel what lingered between us. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. Forgiveness takes time. But it was something gentler, a truce between two hearts that had already hurt enough. One evening, I stayed late again, not sure if I was waiting for her or for closure. The rain had stopped, but the air still smelled like it, clean, soft, with a trace of the storm that had passed. I was halfway through shutting down my computer when I heard her voice behind me. "You never did learn how to leave on time." I turned. She was standing there, leaning against the doorway, that faint, tired smile back on her lips. She looked like herself again, the version I'd first noticed, calm, grounded, quietly beautiful. "Maybe I was waiting," I said. "For what?" I met her eyes. "For you to stop running." She didn't look away this time. Her expression shifted, not guilt, not sadness, just a kind of recognition. She walked closer, slow and deliberate, until she stood just a few feet away. The office was dim, shadows stretching long across the floor. For a moment, it felt like time had folded back to the beginning, to the first night we'd stood this close, pretending not to feel what we both did. "I don't know what happens next," she said quietly. "I don't even know if I should ask for another chance. I just know I miss the way we used to talk, before I broke it." I stepped closer, enough for her voice to drop to a whisper. "Then maybe we don't have to fix it all at once," I said. "Maybe we just start talking again." Her eyes softened, tears forming but never falling. She nodded slowly, and when she reached for my hand, it wasn't hesitant this time. It was gentle, deliberate, the kind of touch that says I still care, even if I don't have all the answers. Her fingers were cold, so I wrapped mine around hers. We stood there, saying nothing, the city lights spilling faint gold across her face. The hurt between us hadn't vanished, it had just settled into something quieter, something almost peaceful. When she finally spoke, her voice was low. "You don't hate me?" "I tried," I said. "Didn't work." That made her laugh, soft, real, the sound I'd been missing for weeks. Outside, the night had calmed completely. The last traces of rain had dried, leaving only the smell of wet pavement and the hum of distant traffic. We didn't promise forever that night. We didn't even define what this was. But as she rested her head lightly on my shoulder, her breath warm against my neck, I realized something simple. Sometimes love doesn't need to start over. It just needs two people willing to stay, even after the breaking.